Reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Happy Hearthstone podcast. I am your host, Josh Augustine, and this week I'm joined by Mick Montgomery, founder of Spazbot Studios, PGA award-winning producer and host of the Starting Zone and Stormcast, two awesome podcasts. Hello, Mick.
Josh, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm super excited to be on the show tonight.
Nice. Well, we're excited to have you here. So this is your first time being on the show.
Yes, it is.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of your experience with Hearthstone, card games in general, why people should care what you think?
Well, for Hearthstone, I've been playing since the day the beta was released, back in the summer of 2013. So I was one of the few to get right in immediately. And so that was obviously really exciting for me because trading card games or card collection games were something that I hadn't had a whole lot of background in, but was one of those types of things that I really wanted to get into, but really didn't have any friends or anyone who knew. And I have a lot of nerd friends. I mean, let's be real honest. Like I have geeks and nerds and fanboys and fangirls of all flavors in my life, but nobody for some reason ever played, games like Magic the Gathering or any of those types of things. So I was really excited that Blizzard was doing something because I knew it would be accessible for someone like myself to get into. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. So I've been basically playing nonstop since the beta was first introduced back then, and I've been playing ever since.
Okay. All right. Now, are you more of an arena guy or constructed, or where do you fall?
I do enjoy playing arena, but I will say I tend to play constructed about 80% of the time. Okay. So I tend to spend a lot of time tweaking my constructed decks, and then I do a lot of experimentation, and then I take the decks that I'm most comfortable with into the ladder, and then try my best to get past to beat myself every season. That's what I try to do.
Okay, nice. So what's the highest you've got, if you don't mind me asking?
The highest I've been to is this season. I got up to 15.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. So let's talk about why we're happy. Why don't you go first this time, Mick?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm happy for a couple of reasons. The first one, of course, is that last night, after making a terrible mistake early on in my Hearthstone career, dusting Leroy Jenkins, I managed to... Yeah, I know. For some reason, I thought it would be better to have a different legendary at the time. So
it wasn't like King Crush, was it?
No,
or what is it?
Okay. Mukla. No, it was which one did I pick up? It was a decent one. Okay. But no, I think it was actually Karn Bloodhoof or something like that.
Okay. That's solid.
Yes. So this last weekend I bought some cards. Because I was like, you know what, I'm gonna buy a pack of cards, and sure enough, Leroy popped up in that pack of cards. So
nice.
That's why I'm happy. And also, I got a couple of other cards like you always think that you have one, like Wild Pyromancer. Like I thought I totally had Wild Pyromancer, and I didn't. Yeah. And sure enough, I got a couple of those and some other necessary cards. So that's why I'm happy.
Yeah, I always run into that. So the way, obviously, you know how the deck battles work, where the winner, I have to build their deck. And so a lot of times I look and I'm like, oh yeah, I got those cards. Like I was building the Barbarian Warrior deck for today.
Right.
And what was the card? Oh, it was Argent Commander.
Oh, which you think you'd have.
Yeah, and I was sure I had him, but nope, I had to go out and craft it. And actually, I'll add this to my happy list. I actually opened a couple packs because I needed more dust to craft him, and in the process, I got a golden one out of the pack.
Oh, that's great.
Which was horribly lucky. But then another reason I'm happy, I went on a bike ride for the first time in like a month, and I was super excited. The previous time I went on a bike ride, I drank a lot of milk before I went, and it did not end well.
No, why did you do that?
I just wasn't thinking, right? Because I had cereal for breakfast and that sort of stuff. And then I didn't have any food. So I was like, well, I'll just ride my bike to get lunch. And it did not go well.
Yeah.
So this time I learned my lesson. It was a much smoother, pleasant experience.
Yes, lots of water beforehand.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I had the same situation today as well. I went on a big hike with the family. And we just found this wonderful, peaceful trail in Long Beach. And had a really lovely day. It was gorgeous weather here in Southern California.
Nice. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. It was a little warm, but still nice.
Yeah.
All right, so this week, we're doing a deck battle,
Hmm.
which I'm super excited about because we skipped out on deck battles for a while, but we are back on them. So for people that don't know, we do these deck battle episodes about once a month. This is where the guest host brings on their favorite deck onto the show and Hello?
That time it was me.
Okay.
Skype just crashed. I'm just sitting here talking, not like an internet thing, like just crashed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, it's that XSplit. I'm telling you. At least that's what it is on my end. All right, cool. So I have the time down. We'll jump right in.
Uh-huh.
So and then they put their decks to the test, and we do a battle in the best of 3 series live on the show. The twist is that I always use the current reigning champion deck of the show, which is the last deck that a guest host brought on and won with. So we finally have a new defending champion deck because for like 6 months it's been that Hunter Beastmaster deck, but Redbeard's Barbarian Warrior deck won the throne on episode 29. So I gotta ask, Mick, did you listen to that episode? Have you researched this deck you're going up against?
Not only have I researched this deck, I've built and played this deck.
Okay. So I gotta know, this deck that you've built, did you build it specifically to beat this deck, or is this actually a deck that you like playing?
No, this is a deck that I have. This is one of the first decks that I had that I felt like, oh, I'm a decent Hearthstone player. So I've had this deck for a long time. It's built off of an old, what at the time would have been the most popular, one of the top 2 or 3 most popular Druid decks at the time. And so this is a deck that I have continued to keep lit up in my selection of decks, and it has been tweaked and adjusted over time. And that's why it's in the state that it is right now, with a lot of variants to it. And so it's the one too that I have really started to enjoy playing again the last month or so, based on a few changes and 2 cards that have been changed in the deck in the last month, and those have really kind of made the difference. So it's the deck that I'm the most confident with, especially when other friends challenge me and like, oh, I'm playing Hearthstone now. I'm like, okay, well, I'll like throw out my zoo deck, and then I'm like, okay, well, they beat me with that. How about this deck? And usually I'm fine with it.
Okay, so when you need a win, this is the deck you fall back on.
Yes.
Awesome. So Mick has put together a full deck list along with some great commentary for all the cards that he picked in the deck that he's going to be playing today, so you can build his new deck too. Whether it wins or loses, you can build it. It's on GameDiplomat.com. We'll have this show notes for this episode, then also a separate post that Mick's written up with all of his great commentary. But before people do that, Mick, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. You haven't won just yet.
Nope.
I guess you should probably tell them what the deck is.
Sure, it's a Spell Power-heavy Druid deck. Well, I should say it's a Spell Power control deck, and what that basically means is it's not an aggro deck. It's a classic control deck, and what it does is it kind of ramps towards one single legendary in the deck, which is really necessary for the deck to work. You can not have some of the other legendaries. Right now I carry 2 in the deck, but for primarily what you basically do is you want to control the board up through turn 7 and 8, and all the way up into turn 9. And at that point, you drop Malygos and you buff basically all of the spells that you have as a druid that do damage directly to the face by 5. Which is pretty good, because in essence you turn a card like Starfire, which is a 6 mana cost card that does 5 damage. You turn it into basically a low-cost Pyroblast that also draws a card. And then usually by that stage in the game, too, you're very close to having your opponent down to like somewhere in the 20s or 15 in health, and then you just kind of pummel them with a swipe or with a Starfire, and you've got the game.
Yeah, I got to tell you, a Malygos-powered swipe is that terrifies me. Yeah. I don't think I've ever actually had that happen to me in a game, but when I was looking through your deck list, I was just like, oh man, that's like 9 damage to the face. No.
It's 9 damage to the face and 6 damage to all minions.
So basically just kill everything.
Yeah. Yeah, the worst combination that anyone gets up against with this particular deck, at least for me, is if I have a swipe and a Starfire in my deck and I have Malygos on the board on turn 9. So I'll drop Malygos, and then Even if they have a full board, if he can at least last till the next turn 10, and I do 10 on a Starfire, and then I do 9 to his face and 6 to everything else, and it's either a board clear and a win, or just at least a massive board clear, and he's down to, he or she is down to 5 or 6 health at that point.
Yeah. So is this really the only way the deck wins? Like, if you don't draw Malygos, do you lose?
No, not really. The nice thing about this deck is it also relies on some pretty beefy cards on turn 7 and turn 8 that are Druid-specific cards. So the thing about this deck is it really is a Druid deck. Not to criticize anyone that constructs any other decks, but a lot of decks that you see, or at least in my opinion, that are doing well or are popular, they're popular because it's a lot of great quality neutral cards and legendaries, and then some flavor of the character mixed into it. This deck is mostly Druid cards with some minions thrown into the mix. Obviously, the legendary, which is Malygos, and the second legendary that I carry right now, which is Cenarius, is obviously a Druid legendary, but it really focuses on teeing off with also your Ironbark Protectors, but mostly your Ancients of War. Those are kind of 2 key cards in this deck as well, and also the Starfires and Swipes, and even Moonfire if it's buffed properly. So there's 2 other spell power buff cards in this deck, the Azure Drake and the Cobalt Geomancer, that do buff spell power as well. So you don't necessarily have to have Malygos on the board, but it really does help kind of close the game out by around turn 11 if you haven't, if not sooner.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. I'm glad there's a backup plan, because I was a little worried that it was kind of like boom or bust.
Yeah, no, and 2, you've got cards in here like Swipe, obviously 1, but you also have Bite and Claw in here as well, which are 2 very effective cards that buff Malfurion. And then you could, if you have a clear board at that point, or at least you don't have a taunt in front of you, you can go right to the face with those cards and do some pretty good damage. The minions that you do carry, even in turn like 4 through 6, those are pretty solid cards. So it's not kind of a one-trick pony deck, and I don't think any Druid deck really is a one-trick pony deck because of the versatility of almost every card that Druids have. They all kind of do 1 or 2 things. And so because of that, I think you can have lots of variance in how to win. But I do believe that if you try and play this deck very aggro in the first 6 turns, you can get into trouble real quick.
Okay. I'm really excited to see how these 2 are going to pair off. But before we jump into the duel, what are some of the key cards that, define this deck? Obviously Malygos, right?
Yeah, I would say Malygos definitely, I feel, defines the deck. I would say the Ancient of War. Those are the other 2 cards that really define the deck because they're used at turn 7 or turn 8 to basically set up Malygos. So you get kind of a beefy taunt out there on the board right away. And
those are the ones that come down as a 5/5, and you can either add 5 health and taunt or add some amount of attack, right?
Yes, that's correct. You can either do basically 10 attack and 5 health without a taunt, or you can do 5 attack and 10 health with a taunt.
Okay.
So if you throw that guy down and then you throw down 1 or 2 of them, then you can keep Malygos safe. You can get him out of the board. Cenarius as well, you can get him out there as well. And he can, if you're in the situation where you're lucky enough to have 2 Ancients of War out on the board by turn 9, and you have Cenarius, he can then buff those to 7 12s or buff those to 12 5s, depending on what you choose for him to do. Or obviously you can drop his treants as well. But for the most part, the Ancients of Lore, those are very key. Swipe is very key in this deck. Starfire is also very key as well. And as a low cost, turn 1 or turn 2 card, I would say Wrath is very important to this deck. Because that is a great card to help you control the board in turns 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah. All right.
And that Wrath, if your listeners don't know, Wrath is a card that you can either do 3 damage to a minion or do 1 damage to a minion and draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, that just being able to draw the card is so invaluable, especially against something like Rush Warlock or something where they're going to have a ton out there with 1 health anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can also, this deck also contains, not that it's integral to, it is important, I think, to the deck, and it's a great card, but the Azure Drake is also in this deck. So not only does that card buff your spell power, but it also draws you a card when it's laid out on the board as well.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so that's the deck. As a reminder, the defending champion deck is Barbarian Warrior, which is a lot about weapons and charge minions and just punch you in the face, winning by mid-game, essentially. That was designed by Redbeard. It's only beaten one deck so far, the one it won to take the throne. So yeah, so we're gonna go do our best of 3 series right now. You can watch it in its entirety in our show notes on GameDiplomat.com. We'll have my perspective and Mick's perspective, so you can watch, both sides, which is always fun. And it'll all be in the show notes. Yeah. So we'll be right back.
All right.
All right, we're back from the series. I'll take the liberty of announcing how it went, Mick, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
All right, so it's actually very similar to the last series we did with the Barbarian Warrior deck, where Redbeard crushed me in like 10 minutes flat. This time, I have to say, Mick, you lasted longer than I did with the Beastmaster deck. It was about 13 minutes, but still a 2-0 victory for the Barbarian Warrior.
And let's be honest, the first round was a 32-0 trouncing on my end.
Yeah, but I don't know. So it's really hard to gauge how much you win when it's like aggro versus control, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if the game had gone like 2 more turns, I would have just sputtered out completely. And then it would have been a trouncing the other way.
Yeah, and I think actually too, and this is obviously not to provide any sort of excuse for the game. The game is what the game is, which is why Hearthstone's great. But that first round, that was the draw of the worst possible draws with this particular Druid deck, that's the one where you go, your mulligans are all turned. You get like 4s and 7s on your draw, and then you mulligan back into 4s and 7s. So you're like, oh man, I've got nothing. And then also too, it exposed a flaw that I forgot about in this deck, which is dealing with the warrior deck. Is especially that barbarian deck, there's so many weapons you have to deal with. And if I had just one ooze in my deck at that particular time, that might have been helpful, but I didn't. So
I even mentioned that on my stream, because I was like, should I hold on to this weapon? I was like, I don't remember if he has oozes. I better just swing, because I don't want to lose this thing.
No, yeah. And which is obviously what you did. And also, too, you dropped that fairy right at the beginning of that particular turn. I'm like, oh, that's the card I don't want, because I looked down at my wrath and I'm like, and it does nothing against that. So.
Yeah, I was super, like, I talked to the stream a lot before I did that. Like, do I coin and do fairy, or do I wait? And it's like, no, because I have to win by turn 8. Like, right? Because the way I looked at our series was like, I was playing against a clock. And it was like, if I didn't have to get your health total to 0. I had to get it to 0 before turn 8. Because if turn 8 rolled around, it's like I knew the Ancients of War and the Iron Bark Protectors were going to start dropping. It was even though you said like, okay, the health totals were a big disparity. Mm-hmm. I was super stressed out the whole time.
Well, you are very much against this deck. You're right. It's definitely you're up against it, and I think what works with the deck, the Druid deck in rank play, is that they don't know usually what's coming, because most people ignore spell power as a whole anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but the strength of the Barbarian deck, and I know this because I played it too, is the output of damage right away, and then just you can do damage every single turn, and that's what's really tough to match up against for a spell power deck that basically can't do anything about your weapons. That going into this, I was like, oof, this is going to be rough. I've got to mark up a minion at some point in order to try and get through those first 6 rounds. And basically, once again, even in the second round, had we gone another turn, I had Cenarius just sitting there. And that would have been able to give you some more fits of like, now I have 2 more taunts I have to deal with. So, it like I said, it's a deck that just the timing was really not in the cards tonight. And you really that Barbarian deck is so strong. Yeah. I was just like, wow, there's more. Oh, there's more damage. Oh, there's more damage.
Yeah, I love Redbeard's philosophy of like anything after turn 3 needs to do something the turn that it's played.
Yes.
Like, it's either silencing, or it's charging, or it's giving you a weapon, or it's just like, it does feel really good, because every turn I was sitting there counting the cards in my hand like, okay, I have 8 surprise damage I can give him next turn. And then next turn is like, okay, well, I can only do 4 surprise damage next turn, but it's like, that adds up really quick.
Mm-hmm. No, it was tough on my end to sit there and go, well, damn. Because usually what I can do with this deck is I can pretty much, I can clear the board almost every time.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really great, I think, about this particular deck in ranked play is you're up against so many, cheapo minion decks, cheapo minion aggro decks where it's like, here's a bunch of, 2 health cards, 1 health card. For me, a Starfall just clears the whole board and I'm fine. A Swipe clears the whole board and I'm fine. I can't do that against the Barbarian deck at all because there's always that weapon up in the corner that I'm like, well, that's still there and I can't do anything about it. So
do you think you would swap something out and get an Acidic Ooze in there?
I think an Acidic Ooze against would be probably a strong, to swap out the pint-sized summoner for the Acidic Ooze, I think is probably the right move for me to make. And I think also as well, potentially looking at either dropping my mark of nature completely and dropping another cheap taunt in there, like a Goldshire or a Shield Bearer or something like that.
Yeah.
I think those would be helpful to kind of stem the tide against this deck because with the amount of weapons that you have at your disposal, and I knew that going into it, oh man, I need to have pretty ideal draws in order to survive these first 7 rounds. And the first round I didn't. The second round I did. I did have actually a very good draw up against you. But, that's the tough part about dealing with the blood sales that come out.
Yeah. Which
is such a great, smart play on his part to construct that. When I heard him go through that on the last deck battle episode, I was like, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's like the one pirate card that works.
Yeah, exactly. Poor pirates. I really want the pirate deck to be a thing. Maybe someday.
They have to fix. They really do have. I was looking at them today because I have all the pirates except for Captain Greenskin.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why doesn't this work? And I just kept looking at them and I thought, because none of these... they're not good cards.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, like it's sure they have cool synergies, but they're bad cards to start with, so you don't even want to play them.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas like the Murlocs are all decent cards. They aren't like incredible, but they're decent. Like a 2/1 charge for 2. Like okay, that's a good card.
Yeah, but the synergy is so ridiculous with the Murlocs.
Yeah,
you get
+1/+1.
Exactly. And then you get a couple of war leaders out there and then drop old Murkai and it's like, well, you're off to the races by turn 5 or 6. And but anyway, going back to the Barbarian deck, I think that that is and you played those on that second round. You had Blood Sail followed by another Korkron Elite and then I think another Blood Sail. And I had silences to handle, but I didn't have enough to clear the board. So
yeah. So I'm curious. I can't remember if it's the first game or second game. You use Swipe pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
And with your deck, is that kind of a desperation play because you'd rather save it for Malygos, or do you normally use that stuff early?
No, I think that the number one rule is with this deck is your priority turns 1 through 7 is to clear the board. Mm-hmm. So if you can clear, you clear. Because remember, most of your real punch him in the face cards are coming towards the end of the deck. So the idea here is to control as much as you can. That's your first priority. So if you can clear the board with a swipe, then you clear the board with a swipe.
Okay, and then just whatever spells you have in hand after Malygos is down is what you rely on. Yeah.
Yeah, and two, you have to understand. I think also too, what happens a lot in this deck is, I'll drop an Iron Bark or I'll drop an Ancient, and they'll get silenced. Mm-hmm. To basically bypass the taunt, which is fine because by that point, if I've got an Iron Bark and I've got Malygos still on the board and they're surviving, I've still got 8 + 4. I've got 12 damage to the face right there.
Yeah, so, that is true. You don't need Swipe at that point. Yeah.
Swipe is great. And, I used to primarily use it to clear minions. And then I was like, early on, I had this realization that, this is actually a to the face card if I want it to be, especially if it's buffed out. So,
yeah.
And if I had a Cobalt Geomancer on the board as well, that swipe turns into a 6/2. So, it does 6 damage to whatever minion and 2 damage to everybody else, and it becomes much more potent.
Okay, so you do have Cobalt Geomancer in the deck because you didn't play him at all. So I'm guessing
never came out.
Draw him. Yeah,
I never drew into him. Just like a Cobalt, never there when you need it.
Well, you shouldn't have taken his candle, buddy.
Yeah. He's like, no, take candle.
So, okay. So, would you say overall so I guess I'm curious, how does this deck fare against control decks? Like other, control Paladin or control Warlock, that sort of stuff?
It does really well against warlocks because the thing that's also in the deck is there's 2 healing touches, which give you 8 health back. So those, you get one of those, and I think what happens, the warlock gets them behind so far on the health. He can't. It starts to make less sense for him to use life tap. So that's the part where, you kind of go. And I did get a healing touch. I think I got 2 off in that matchup. So, those I think help stem the tide. The paladins, I think it does well against the control paladins, but it is still very tight. It's stressful against those guys. But I find that once I get to 7 and 8, they don't have enough firepower at the end there to make it work.
Yeah, I don't think, if we're just talking about late game cards, like nothing but what happens after turn 8, I don't think any class can really compete with the Druid, with just like Ironbark Protectors and Ancients of War. Like, there's just so much beef there.
Yeah. And that's the truth. It's just the amount of meat you have coming out at the end of the game is just nuts.
Yeah. So, all right. So for people that want to try out this deck, what are some advice you can give them just about how to play it right, or which decks to play against and which ones to avoid? Obviously, avoid Barbarian Warrior, I think is safe to say.
Well, I think like I said, if you swapped out one of your low cost minions for an ooze, probably a smart thing to do. I think, and like I said, a young taunt, like a 2-cost taunt or a 1-cost taunt, is probably something you might want to take a look at. You can definitely sacrifice a Wrath for that, or you could sacrifice Mark of Nature for that. So those are things that's the thing too with the deck, is when you look at basically how I have it laid out today, you see I have a lot of 1 selections and not double ups on the cards, where I have 2 of the same card in the hand. So take a look at the cards as they lie, and then play around with how many you want to devote to what before you decide to cut a card out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because if you'd rather have, I don't think you really need it, but if you wanted to have, 2 Ironbark Protectors and 2 Ancients of War, then obviously you'd have to lose something like the Big Game Hunter or something like that. So, and the Big Game Hunter is really there to play against other cards that, like Priests, when they drop, Temple Enforcers and double up their health, and then match that with the when they can match up the health back to the damage. And you're like, oh, that's rough. Or if someone drops a Warsong Commander out there and with a bunch of minions, and that's what that's for. But primarily the rules are, like I said, through turns 1 through 7, if you can clear the board first in lieu of going to the face. If you're clear to the face, go ahead and do it. If you're up on health too in those first 7, so if you've, for some reason you're at 32 because you've done a claw and they're at, 22 or 24 for some reason, then start going to the face early. But you really just want to make sure that they have a clear board by the time you get to turn 7, because then you're dropping your huge taunts out, and they've got really nothing stacked up to do anything about it.
Man, I was so worried once it got late and you started dropping like Ancient of War and, oh man, scary stuff. I got pretty fortunate because I ended up drawing answers to those big guys right when I needed them. Like I had the Silence guy so I could skate past, and I had the Execute, each of which I only have 1 in my deck, and I was fortunate to get them. Yeah,
and you got them at a good combo point too, where you're like, oh, great, I can squeak by him. And I knew when I dropped him, I said, at least I'm going to burn 2 of the cards in his hand to get rid of that.
Yeah, that is true. All right. So any other parting words before we go on to the next section?
No, I think that I don't know if you've had anyone who's played Druid a lot come on the show yet, but I do think that Druids are a great class based on their versatility. And I do believe that there's a number of different ways to play them. This is just kind of one example of trying to take advantage of the fact that they're kind of baby mages to a degree in Hearthstone, with the amount of kind of spell power damage that they have. But I do think that you can really come up with some interesting stuff. And this deck does allow you to try and play out that versatility a little bit more. And I think the nice thing about it early on, based on the cards I have listed in the sideboard, you can still get into this deck even though you haven't played for a long time and don't have a lot of cards. So the really only legendary that's kind of key is Malygos. But if you don't have, for some reason, you don't have 2 Iron Barks, you can substitute with a Lord of the Arena just to have a kind of that beefy taunt out there to kind of carry you through. So there's definitely cards that you can substitute in if you're new to the game and you want to work with a Druid deck. But you can definitely. I didn't demonstrate it tonight, but you definitely can also win prior to turn 7 and 8 based on how it goes.
Yeah. So I gotta ask, because there's one card in here that's in your sideboard that I gotta know why Naturalize is there, because conventional wisdom says that's a terrible card.
It is a terrible card, but if it's one that most folks usually get as a Druid, and if you don't have, if you haven't collected the cards that you need, like if you don't have 2 Starfalls, then a Naturalize can substitute in for a Starfall.
Okay.
But it is a horrible card.
Okay. All right. I do have to tell a quick story, actually. This week, one of my friends at the office, we did a Hearthstone duel. We duel about once a week during our lunchtime. Mm-hmm. And he built this really crazy deck. Is actually apparently built on a deck that Artosis built and used in a tournament a while back. Where, are you familiar with the concept of milling as a Magic player? Yep. Mm-hmm. So he built a Hearthstone deck that is built around milling, which is a Magic term that means taking cards from your opponent's library and putting them in the graveyard.
Yep.
And you win that way, because in Magic, instead of taking damage when you can't draw a card like you do in Hearthstone, you just instantly lose.
Yeah.
So he built a Druid deck that's all about making your opponent draw cards to the point that they're milling them and start taking damage from it.
Yeah.
And at that point, Naturalize becomes incredible, because their hand is full, because you've already made them draw a ton of cards with like Cold Light Seer and stuff like that. The card just reads 1 mana, destroy a minion. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, too, if you're playing with control, you're not super worried about, in the late, you're not really, you are worried about staying ahead of card count. You don't want them, loaded up, especially if you're playing against an aggro deck. But, it can be a card that when used, and this is why it's not specific, it can be a card, or this is why it's too specific, it can be a card used late where you need to clear something, and that can do it for you, because it's not a conditional clear. It just kills a minion. As opposed to, a card like Execute in the Warrior deck, where you need to have damage on that thing before you can do it.
Yeah.
And so it is in that case, if you were really, you're down to, it's turn, they're at 7 health or something like that, and you're at 8 health, and you're in the very, very late game, and they throw out a taunt, and you've got, you need to clear in order to get that, last big huge. Say you have an Iron Bark Protector and you've got 8 that you can throw at his face, but he throws a taunt right in front of you. You can Naturalize that guy off the board and go right to the face and get your, your end game done.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, man. Yeah, I would love to have a Naturalize in this Barbarian Warrior deck, because that Execute, like you said, is so situational, where there's just so many games where it's in my hand and I have no way of damaging that minion, but I really want to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the rough part. And, the great thing about going back to it, one card we didn't talk about in this particular deck, what is buffed that's insane, is the Moonfire card for the Druids too, which is, if Malygos on the board, this has happened to me a lot. Now that 1 damage 0 cost spell is now a 6 damage 0 cost spell. So,
which is pretty incredible. So how often do you save that? Do you only use that with Malygos, or do you sometimes use it just to clear the board too?
I use it to clear the board if I can, but a lot of times around the middle, like turns 4 through 6, Moonfire is not really that helpful.
Yeah.
So if I'm in the early game and I can clear like a 2/1 minion of theirs off the board with Moonfire, I'll use it. But if I don't have to, I do like to save it, because if I can get Malygos or even Azure Drake out on the board, that's 2 damage.
Yeah.
So it is super cool to kind of be able to swing hard for the fences with a Starfire and a Moonfire, and throw out 16 damage for 6 mana, and turn, 10 or something like that.
Yeah. And I got to add on there, all of the removal spells on Druid have awesome art. Like they look
Yeah.
so cool. Like the swipe is the giant bear druid, like,
Mhm.
and the poor undead is like, no, don't kill me. And like, because I
Yeah.
hadn't really looked at Moonfire before, because I haven't used it very much. But it's like a massive moonbeam, like
Yeah.
obliterating some elemental.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
looks
And
awesome.
it used to be it used to be a boomkin, just kind of sitting there squawking on the card. So they changed the art of it. So
Thank goodness.
yeah.
All right,
So
so I think it's fair to say, Redbeard, congratulations on your
mhm.
first win as the reigning champion deck. He's now been the winner for over a month, beaten 2 decks so far. And the next deck battle we have on here, we'll battle it again. So yeah, and that's obviously mixed deck. Highly encourage you to check it out. I really agree with his assessment that druids are a really fun, interesting class to play early on. It's one of those classes with all just the choices, the choose one effects. It's probably not the first class you want to play when you get into the game. That's why they start you off with mage. But it's a
Mhm.
really interesting next step to go to and be like, oh wow, this is what all these cards can do. This is really interesting. So please do that. It's on it's on GameDiplomat.com, along with all of his advice on how to tweak. And if you don't have all the cards, like he said, he has good replacements there, so you can start playing with it right away. Let's get into the question, Mick.
Okay.
Scott Valentine wrote in, and he said, "Do you hold on to silence effect cards for late game, or play them early? Do you have any creative uses of silence?" So two-part question. So let's tackle the first one first. Do you use silence effects early or late? It depends on the class, right? It
Yeah.
kind of depends on what you expect them to have. So
Mhm.
like for druid, like against your druid deck, right? I'm not too worried about anything you're playing on the first 4 turns. So I'm probably
Right.
not going to use silence, but I know you're going to have big beefy taunts, big beefy buffed guys because that's what druids do.
Yeah.
So I save it for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Like if you know you're up against, or in paladins to a degree too,
Yeah.
in the late game.
Oh yeah, Blessing of Kings, man.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. Especially if they throw it on top of one of their guardians, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
man, that hurts so bad. So I think that it really is like a warlock. I feel like if you're up against a warlock, you could use it right away. I think if you're, I wouldn't wait too late for that on a mage either,
Yeah.
because there really isn't nothing late game for them that is, that they're gonna taunt up with, So that's it. Really depends on who you're playing against and in your play style too. And if you're really playing a control deck, you want to use silence as much as you can. But if you've got big finishers that are minion based and you're worried about taunt, then saving that silence for when you're going to play those cards so that you can bypass a taunt should it come out is important.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually what I did in our first game that we played. I had that silence guy and I drew him pretty early, but I was like, I'm not gonna play it until it's like desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until that big 8/8 taunt is down. I will say if you're playing a rush deck, obviously, even if you're playing against a druid, if you know that you can't so as an aggro deck, you need to win by turn 6 or 7, or else you're just not gonna win.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, don't wait even if you're playing against a druid because it's not going to help you because you won't live that long. Just play it early
Right.
because that's when you've already put all your marbles into that first 6 turns. Just keep it going.
Yep.
So what about creative uses of silence? What do you think?
Um, that's a great question because I think what you're looking for is one of those, um, what's one that, like for example, I've done this in the past. Like I've had a berserker.
Mm-hmm.
One of the Gurubashi berserkers up there that's already taunted, and I've pinged him with Moonfire and lit him up so that I can play a big game hunter on him to get him off the board.
Oh yeah.
So I've done stuff like that. I think that's what he's looking for is a play like that, and I don't really know. I think that the one rule that I would say is really look to when you're going to use silence, especially on multiple minions on the board. You want to look at the one that's going to break the synergy. That's the one you want to kind of take off the board. So if like a war leader for Murlocs, for example, if you silence that card, it's going to drop all the other minions, attack, power, health, all that stuff down. So I think you want to really look to break synergy, especially on multiple cards on the board, and that's a great use of silence as well. It's definitely more effective than just bypass taunt.
Yeah. The thing I really love looking for is creatures that don't have any natural attack damage. So stuff like the shaman has the what's the totem? I'm totally blanking. That gives damage to nearby people, +2 damage to minions next
It's
to it.
yeah. It's the
I can't
I know
even.
which one.
I'm
It's
not
not
even seeing it. Where is it?
Is it the Syrian totem?
Oh, the flame tongue totem.
There it is.
There we
Flame
go.
tongue, yeah.
So stuff like the flame tongue totem, and the priest has the O5, whose damage is always equal to its health. So when you silence it, it just stays as an O5 that can't do anything, the light spawn. I really like finding stuff like that because not only does, it neutralizes their attack, they can't do anything. It then also takes up a spot on their board because they can only have 7 minions max. So like it's my favorite on when I'm playing priest because I have mass dispel that silences all enemy minions. And if you're playing like a shaman who has a bunch of those O2s out that do a bunch of stuff, you silence all of them. Suddenly his board is filled with 4 minions that do nothing. He can only have a maximum of 3 minions on the board now that actually do something. I guess in that regard too, shamans can't summon the same type of totem even if you've silenced it.
Yeah.
So if you've silenced their Stoneclaw totem, which is I think the most annoying totem that shaman can summon, the taunt one.
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah, but if you silence it and just leave it alone, then he can't bring up another taunt.
Yeah, he'll never get another taunt totem.
Yeah, and then the shaman's basically reduced to having feral spirit. Right, is the one where they draw the two doggies.
Yeah, which is a great card.
Yeah, I hate that card so much.
Yeah, and I mean if you're looking for like more like whoa, I couldn't believe I thought of that. I mean the best example is probably the Ancient Watcher. It's pretty well known at this point, but that's the 2 mana 4/5. But the text says can't attack. And so when you silence him, he can attack. But a lot of times you don't want to be spending a silence on your own guy. You'd rather be silencing whatever they're doing.
Right. Yeah. I wonder too. Oh no, I bet that wouldn't work. Like, can you silence a Void Tear and split it back out to its 2 components?
No, but he would lose the bonus health. So he would have just basically killed his own minions for nothing. So that's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. I like that.
Yeah, I've done that too. Void Tears before. That's why you don't see too many of them out there. You silence it, and they're like, "Man, I just ate 2 of my minions for nothing."
Yeah. And of course, you can silence enraged minions too. I mean, that's probably well known as well, but that is a effect. Especially
the ones that take damage to enrage. Well, they all take damage to enrage, but like the Frothing Berserker. If it gets down to once you taunt them, you eliminate that bonus damage. So now they're just like a 2/2, and that
they become very lackluster.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few minions. I mean, if you just go through the classes minions list, it's funny to look at the minions that don't have like natural stats. Like let's see. I'm trying to think of a couple other ones. The best one is just like that light spawn that's an 05, where it's just like, man, if you silence it, that card just becomes terrible. And of course, it also gets rid of Divine Shield, which is super useful. But all right, that's enough about silence. Let's move on. We have an iTunes review before we get to the card of the week. This one is actually from our website. Callum Orr hates iTunes and didn't want to create an account on iTunes or install it on his computer, but he left us a review on the website. So he wrote 5 stars, and that's good enough for me. I'll read it anyways. He said, I had to leave a comment after Josh complained about the lack of international reviews. I'm hailing from Scotland, an excellent country that my wife will be very happy about. I have listened to all episodes and am absolutely loving the show. I feel like I am learning something new every week, and this card choice one was particularly good, which is the last episode we did with Scott Lance. He says, Josh is a brilliant host, and I even tweeted him a few times about the numerous highs and lows I have had on the roller coaster of Hearthstone. We've all been there. He says he is always friendly and great help. Once again, keep up the great work and always looking forward to learning more. 5 stars. Thank you. It's 5 stars in my heart, which is more important than iTunes, right?
I think so. I think validation is important no matter anywhere you can get it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's better than no review this week. How depressing would it just be? Oh, nothing to say. So thank you, Callum Moore. We appreciate it. We love that you're loving the show. We've gotten so much good feedback about Scott's episode last time about all of his card, how to pick the best cards. Have you listened to that one yet, Mick?
I have, and I thought it was. I took me 3 different commutes to get through it all, but
Yeah, it was a longer one.
yeah, I thought it was a great. I thought it was a great episode for folks to really kind of learn to evaluate cards is so important because, and what made me realize is that one of the most important things to look at when your cards is how versatile the card is. What I mean by that is how it can be applicable in many different situations. It's good in a lot of situations as opposed to just in a very specific circumstance, and I think that kind of exercise and doing the math, which you continue to keep bringing up during that episode, is really, really smart way to kind of for players who don't know much about how to play a game like this. That is such an important skill set for them to have, more so than understanding mana curve or understanding how to build a deck. Just being able to know if you've got a good card is really important.
Yeah. All right, are you ready to sing a song, my friend?
Oh, I have to sing? Is that the deal?
Yeah, so
that's really happening today?
Yeah, it is. So we're entering the card of the week segment, and part of the rules, unless there is like some religious or some very strict policy that prevents you from singing, you have to sing an intro song for the card of the week. You can say anything, be any tune, as long as it includes, card of the week.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Sometimes we'll find that special card, and tonight on Happy Hearthstone, we have that card for you. It's the card of the week. The card of the week. The card of the week with Josh Augustine. The card for the week, not so meek. The card of the week.
Okay.
Does that work?
You cannot pretend that you made that all up right now.
I did.
No way. I don't believe it.
Unfortunately, there's a few skill sets that I have that are so specific, they only come up in situations like
So what is this skill set? Tell me more. This is like musical theater background? That sounded like classic Disney movie.
It's that mixed with doing, improv comedy for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
And getting into something where it's like, oh, what do you want us to do? And sing a song. Oh God. So yeah, I more than one occasion found myself in that situation.
Wow. So were you like borrowing a tune or were you just going?
I think that one was inspired by a lot of growing up as a Lutheran and listening to a lot of liturgy and song.
All right. Perfect. Well, this is your first Lutheran card of the week, listeners. Approved by the Lutheran Church.
That would make it the most benign of most cards.
Yeah. It was actually going to be naturalized, but I realized that we already talked about it a bunch this episode, so I'm changing it on you right now, Mick.
Okay.
Surprise, we're doing Vanish.
Oh, okay.
Which is also an exciting card. I like. It's a rogue card, 6 mana cost, rogue spell, and it just says return all minions to their owner's hand. What do you think?
I think that's a great get out of dodge play. Sure. It's a lot like what's the Warlock card where it just eats everything?
Yeah, Twisting Nether.
Twisting Nether. And yeah, I think if you're definitely behind and you're like, I've got nothing on the board and they've got 5 minions, why not?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than having felt like you've wasted your mana.
Yeah.
So if you spent your time like building up a board and you're like, all right, I'm ready to go, and everything gets set back to your hand, like that's highly discouraging.
Yeah, especially if you've spent any amount of time buffing them or doing anything like that, because those buff cards or buff effects just disappear.
They disappear, and that means too you've burned those buffing cards, which is the really terrible for a lot of decks. And let's also not forget, Banish could also work on the reverse side for your cards in a beneficial way. So you throw 2 charges out on the board, banish them back to your hand, throw 2 charges back out on the board again. You see that a lot with shadow stepping on Leroy, for example. So
yeah,
it can also be super duper helpful to get your cards back to you and not lose them. Especially if you have like a Goblin Rocketeer, which that thing dies if you kind of wave at it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, if you wait a couple turns, it'll just kill itself.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just be like, I give up. I'm off it.
Yeah.
But nothing happened to you.
Yeah, I did see someone use it. And this is an expensive trick, right? It's a cool trick. It's 6 mana, but it's an expensive trick. But I did see someone use it can't remember what it was. They used it on a bunch of Battlecry minions on their side of the board. So they actually got to get these Battlecry effects, throw stuff back to their hand, and then get the Battlecry effects again, which was cool. Yeah, it's just, I think it costs too much, right? You can't really use this card.
Yeah, I think that's probably the cost point's a little prohibitive, but I don't think it's meant to be. I don't think it's meant to have synergy above save your own bacon.
Yeah,
I really think that's what it's meant to
okay,
be.
so it's more of a put your opponent's cards back in your hand. That's how you see it. Just, I need more time.
Yeah. I mean, especially for rogues, if they want to pull the trick where they keep, pulling charges off the board and sending them back out, they have Shadow Step for that. So it's, but I do think this is just kind of this is an effective way of doing, of control, of getting the cards off the board. So, it's definitely one that you could take a look at. But I'd also believe that, there are other cards that are better at doing that.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So that is the episode, my friends.
All right.
We're going to have full show notes along with links to Mick's whole deck. Like I said earlier, he went through every single card, explained why it's there, what he uses it for, and kind of tricks, and what you can replace it with if you don't have that card. All of that's on GameDiplomat.com. You can also watch our duel, our head-to-head. I'll have my perspective, and Mick's. Watch mine if you want to see the winner perspective.
No, thanks.
I'm just saying. Just saying. And next week, or in 2 weeks, the next episode of the show, Scott Lance is coming back on the show. He's preparing his deck building construction episode. So last week he talked about how to pick the cards. Now he's going to get more on how to pick a deck theme and kind of know which cards fit that theme.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited because a lot of listeners have already left comments with questions or topics that they want covered. And Scott was answering them before I was. Like, it's my blog, but Scott was in the comments answering them like, don't worry, I'm going to cover that. Yeah, I got that, going. So if you have ideas for what you want Scott to talk about, leave them on the site. In a couple weeks, it'll just be Scott's show. I'll be lucky if I'm here. But...
You're just now you're just facilitating.
Yeah, like Scott will be introducing. He's like, and my guest host this week is Josh Augustine. You guys kind of remember him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He started the podcast.
And other shows, I'm about to actually go record right now with Mick. If you want more of Mick and Mai's, I don't know, how would you describe our voices? Masculine?
No, I would say, what is it? Dulcet tones? Is that's the thing you hear?
Tones, yeah.
There you go.
That's a thing I have heard that I don't know what it means.
Neither do I. I've just heard it. It's a radio thing.
It clearly applies to us, though.
Yes, I think so.
So I'm actually going to go record 2 of Mick's shows that he hosts, Starting Zone and Stormcast, which are about 2 of Blizzard's other awesome games, World of Warcraft and Heroes of the Storm, respectively. Do you want to kind of tell people what the topics are this week, Mick?
Yeah, sure. For episode 81 of the Starting Zone, we're going to talk. We've been covering the classes, and we've been talking about the changes coming in Warlords of Draenor, just to kind of give folks a kind of a bit of a primer for their classes. And so we're going to be talking about Priest this week. We're going to be talking, obviously, some of the patch notes have been mined, the new alphas that have been come out. So that's what we're going to do on 81 of Starting Zone. Stormcast. We're going to talk about the fact that the game basically was rebuilt over the weekend.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk most about. And we're going to talk about Tassadar as well. So that's what we're going to talk about for our Heroes of the Storm show, Stormcast. And folks, by the way, if you want to check out all the other shows we do, and Josh has been on a lot of our shows, you can head on over to spazbotstudios.com. That's where all of our shows are up, and you can check them all out there.
Yeah, and I highly encourage everyone to go do that. Mick, as you can tell, his mic is much better than mine. He runs a very professional program over there. Yeah. It's really smooth and awesome topics and all that sort of good stuff. Go check it out. If you want to talk with us, you can always leave a comment, GameDiplomat.com. You can join our Google Plus community, which is Happy Hearthstone. Just search for Hearthstone, Happy Hearthstone. You'll find us. Or if you want to contact me directly, you can find me on Twitter, @jaugustine, or email me, ajosh@outlook.com. We always want to know what you think of the show, what you want to see added in future episodes, what deck you want to see battling in the future, that sort of stuff. If you have someone you want, because we don't have anyone lined up for the next deck battle episode.
Wow.
Yeah, so if you guys know someone you want on the show, send them my way.
Well, I think we're going to have a guest on in the show that we're about to go record. Matt Lowe. You should probably try and get him.
All right. Well, I'm going to go recruit him. I'm on a recruiting spree.
There you go.
All right. And Mick, where can people find more of you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Mick Montgomery. That's where you can find me on the old Twitter, and that's about really it. Outside of that, in Spazbot, that's where most of my stuff is currently co-located. I am streaming every once in a while on Twitch at twitch.tv/Spazbot Studios, and those videos often make their way over to youtube.com/Spazbot Studios as well.
Awesome. So thank you for joining us this week.
My pleasure, Josh.
Yeah, it was really fun having you on the show.
Thank you.
And to everyone listening, thanks again for visiting the Happy Hearthstone and having a little fun with us. We'll see you next time.